Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming to this event. So this event is a healing hangout and discussion. So I have Jack Coleman here, and I wanted to introduce him to everyone, to the community, and he has a lot to offer, a lot of information to share. And we're going to be discussing uh, healing and the human body, the connection between the human body and the soul. And I know that for myself, when I did a session with Jack, he helped me because I do have some health problems, and I've had that feeling of being disconnected, from my body, and so he helped me work through that, and I just felt like his information would be good to share with others and helpful for others. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jack, and then just let him just start things off with discussion and speaking, and then when he's ready, then we can take questions from people. And I think that during that time when he's working with you on your questions, then I'm going to be sending some healing energy also, and so we'll just kind of go with the flow and see how this works out. So I want to again thank everyone for coming, thank everyone for watching, and then I'll just turn it over to Jack.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you everyone for showing up. I really appreciate it, and yeah, it's awesome. It's nice to experience new people, and I'm kind of fresh in this sort of community. I just dabble in little bits, and I've mainly done a lot of my own work, and so now I'm trying to get it out. And I appreciated Julie for helping me out with this and being able to share on your platform. So today is health, which is something that means a lot in terms of my physical health and my spiritual health, and so we all go through these issues of health and what is being unhealthy, and that's usually the thing that we want to try and work on. So everyone has something that hurts, and that's the most important part, is being aware of what hurts. And so there are a lot of concepts that I want to talk about, which everyone has a different definition in terms of the things that I talk about. So I'm going to start talking about energy, consciousness, and those two can be very ambiguous. We all have a lot of different definitions as to what energy is and what it is not. Same with consciousness, but I'm not necessarily going to define every single or each of those in other words, but I'm just going to go in and give a general rundown of the two, because it really helps out in understanding how to heal ourselves. A lot of times we get into health issues and we don't necessarily know what to do and how to heal ourselves from that state when pain becomes too overwhelming, even if it's physical or emotional. So we have to be aware, we have to be conscious of our realities in order to understand how to heal ourselves. So first we have to recognize and open the doorway between our physical and spiritual body. I feel like that is very important, because a lot of times we look at our reality and we can say some things I can feel into, I can have that spiritual connection with, an invisible connection. But then there are other things in life that we just look at as being lifeless. It's just a physical box, a container, and there's no life force to it, or there's no consciousness. It's not energy. It's a brick, and that's severing that channel. It's severing that connection. And everyone here knows of this connection, because we all do it in different ways. We all have our own abilities, our own talents. We can say we're all X-Men in a way, and we understand how our abilities work on that invisible level. And so it's much more controllable. We have a lot more power in that. But The hard part is trying to do it with something that we aren't as connected with. So with our physical bodies, I'm not saying we aren't connected with our physical bodies, but we might not be at that level. You know, we all have a particular understanding or level of awareness that we are our bodies. We're not contained in our bodies. Our souls are our physical bodies. So that's very important. I can't stress that enough. You know how there's that philosophy of we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when you can, it's actually both. So don't just look at one side and not the other. It's only if you have an imbalance between the two, but it's actually both of those aspects, and they're interchangeable. So our spirituality is our health physicality. That is opening that channel to understanding how to heal ourselves in a physical way. So being in a more spiritually awakened state, we tend to look more into the invisible side of life, and we can miss out on what that means in our physical realities. And that's usually why we get into more of these painful states, and we don't know why. We're going more on one aspect of that dualistic philosophy I just talked about, and we're putting too much weight on one side and not necessarily balancing it on the other side. But I'll get into that. I'll get into that a little later. So basically, energy is that duality that I was talking about in that philosophy. Energy is fluctuation. It is this entire universe. And so if we can look at energy in more ways than just the ways that we're used to, we can start seeing that it's flexible. You can push and pull it. You can stretch it and you can contract it. And if you look at your body, it's made up of all that. It's not just plasma energy in various ways. You know, we can say our bodies are energy, but even if you look at it and you pull your arm toward your face and then you let it go away from your face, that is a contraction and an expansion. That is energy. That's fluctuation. You pulled it in and you pushed it out. And what it took was another physical thing in your body. And that thing had to flex. And then the next thing had to flex. And then the next thing had to flex. So you can go all the way down to your organs, to your cells, to your atoms, to your subatomic elements, subatomic atoms, and then just keep going down and down and down. And so if we understand that all life flexes, all energy flexes, and we are energy, this universe is energy, then all we have to do is understand what is being flexed and how it's being flexed. And that's why we feel pain. Because something was flexed, and it was flexed in a way that we didn't necessarily understand how far we could flex it. That's why if we fall out of a tree and we break our leg, we essentially flexed our bone beyond the point of it wanting to stay in one piece. But if we had a particular level of focus on that bone as we were jumping, it would actually stay intact. And I believe it could stay intact under immense pressure if our focus and our consciousness wanted to contain that. But instead, we weren't paying attention. We jumped out of a tree. We basically just wanted to get on the ground, and we were not paying the least bit of attention to our legs. And so what happened? It said, hey, I'm done. I can't flex that far if you're not going to be present with me. And so what it does is it breaks, it snaps. It says, I give up. I can't hold this weight anymore. So that's our physical pain that we experience. And in a way, I feel like physical pain is spiritual rejection, or negligence. So whenever I start feeling my physical pains in my own body, I really start asking myself, what am I not paying attention to? What am I not considering and communicating with in my body? And health isn't just in your physical body. I'm just talking in terms of physical body, because we can have financial health, and we can have social health, friendships. There are a lot of different ways that we can view health and apply this philosophy. But in terms of our physical bodies, that's always pretty much going to be there. So I'm just explaining it in terms of our physical bodies. But whenever I feel that pain, any sort of pain, I ask myself, what did I do in order for this to feel whatever it is that it feels? Because pain comes in all different shapes and sizes. So I assess the pain, I go right into it. I don't try and avoid it. Most people would feel the pain, and then they would take something to cover it up, and then and say, yeah, I didn't want to deal with it. And so then it doesn't necessarily get healed. It basically just masks it until it comes back, after the pill wears off. But if we really want to heal it, at its core, then we have to touch it at its core. And that's why I ask myself, what am I not paying attention to? Because it's harder to touch the core of it. So if I'm having pains in my legs, or even a headache, if I have a headache, let's say, we all get headaches every once in a while. Instead of taking a pill and saying, pill, please do this for me, I go straight into the pain in my head, and I talk with it. Essentially, I go right into it, and I talk out of it. I guess it's kind of hard to explain, but you go in and then you pull it out, and then you go in and then you pull it out. So that's very important. We have to be more present in our health, and what hurts and what doesn't hurt. So energy is a big role. We have to understand how energy works, and it's in duality. It's in binary coding, and it's in an up-down oscillation. It's vibration. We all know what vibes are, frequencies. We're all light beings. So it's not a matter of becoming light. It's basically acknowledging that we already are light beings. And so if we are light beings, then we need to understand how light works, how it moves, and then we can really start healing ourselves on greater levels. And then even getting to a state where we don't even have to worry about trying to heal ourselves or getting hurt, because we're so ahead of the game around us that it doesn't even matter, because we see how it's all playing together, and then we know how to work within all of that. So that's where consciousness is a container. So when you look at consciousness in terms of a bubble, which is how I like to look at consciousness, whatever's within that bubble, that's what we see and experience. Whatever's outside of that bubble, we have no real sight of. It's like the opposite of the event horizon in a black hole. So when we're looking at a black hole, the event horizon is that ring around the black hole, and no light, we can't see any light from within that bubble, essentially. But if you're inside the black hole, then it's the opposite effect. You can't see any light going out or coming in. So it's that threshold basically is all we can see. And so anything outside of that is just outside of our consciousness, and we don't know what to do with it. So that's why when we live in our own world of consciousness, it gets hard to understand how to do things, because there are always other bubbles of consciousness outside of that. And once we pop that bubble, we can now see these other bubbles. And now we can see, wow, I didn't realize that you were connected to me. and that you were influencing me in this way or that way. And so the more bubbles we pop, the more other bubbles we get to see. And so we get to see someone else's bubble, and we see how it's pushing or pulling on our own bubble. Because like I said, energy is flexible, and that's what a relationship is. You get close and you get farther away, and you can push, you can pull and stretch it and let it flex back in, contract. So when we pop our bubbles, whatever size those bubbles are, we get to see the relationships around us, which is how we get a better understanding of our own personal realities that we live within, because we all have our own particular details, people, places, and things that we experience in our realities, and those are all within our conscious bubble. And we all have different abilities and different states of consciousness. So like I said, we're all in our own particular situation. But when we can expand consciousness to encompass these other bubbles, these other aspects of life, it now starts to make sense why we feel the way that we feel. Because you probably see on Facebook or any sort of internet outlet, there are vibes all around the place. And there are people posting things, and they're just like, does anyone else feel, whatever this is? And we might not know. And that might be because we haven't really made that connection yet with that part of the universe or aspect of our realities. So we're getting influenced in various ways. And if we understand what our consciousness looks like, it gets a lot easier to work with our realities and flow with them to where they're not necessarily influencing us in ways that we don't understand. That's why you see in conspiracy theories, why it's such a negative thing. You never hear of a positive conspiracy theory. And so a lot of times when someone talks about a conspiracy theory, they're trying to find out why they feel the way they feel, because deep down they knew something wasn't quite right, but they just couldn't put the words to it. And so now that they have figured it out and found they found the puzzle, how to piece it all together. And so now they have more control over that. That's what conspiracy theories do for us. They allow us to see more control over something that hurts, and that's the negative side of life. And so if we can apply that same process to our own personal realities, because we can have our own local conspiracy theories if we want, it basically helps us understand the relationship and the communication between people, places, and things in our realities. Doesn't matter if it's a human being, it could be a city. We're talking with a city. The city influences us and makes us feel a certain way. And there are tons of cities out there, as we know, all over the globe, and they all have different vibes to them. So we can feel a certain way. And now we have a better avenue to understand where to go and who to talk to. So if I travel to a city and I feel a certain way, if I understand that my health and my state of being is connected to something other than, let's say, the food that I eat in the city, because a lot of people, their first go-to and feeling bad is, what did I eat? What did I put in my body? Next, they'll talk about, who did I interact with? What kind of things did they say to me? Did I feel good or bad about those things? But then you can keep going with it, and you could say, what city am I in? What sort of energy and state of consciousness is this city built upon? And then you can go on the planet, Mother Earth. You can ask yourself, what kind of person am I a part of? And then solar system, galaxy. You can go any level, big or small. So you can go inward too. But it's just, when you understand how many connections you're a part of already, now you have more options as to who to talk to in trying to figure out a game plan to heal yourself. So that's what consciousness can do, just in terms of expanding it to see all these different relationships that we're a part of. And it's not just what we ate, you know, or how much sleep we got. Those things do play a role in our overall health, but it's not the only factor. So we need to expand that container to encompass more things. And also, if you look at consciousness like a container or a glass, it's full of water. And since energy is dynamic, that means that water is it's vortexing, so it's spinning. And so when you look at, and I may be going a little far out on this one, I don't know if it'll make sense, but if you look at your glass not like a straight cylinder, if you look at it like it flows, it has curves, and then you have the water spinning around inside of it, hopefully all that water is touching every part of that glass. So the surface area is completely covered. And that means that your energy is basic, or the water is flowing with the container that it's in. There are no disharmonies basically between the flow of the water and the shape of the container. But as soon as the flow or the rate of spin of the water does not match the shape of the container, you'll start getting air pockets because the water isn't necessarily flowing evenly throughout the whole glass. And that's what it creates, like a waterfall effect. And then with the waterfall effect, it's going to rub away harder at those places because it's not evenly distributed. It's not in perfect harmony. And so when that water cascades not unevenly, then it puts more pressure on that particular part, that particular curve of the glass or the container, and eventually it erodes, and then it hurts, and then there's a leak, and then we have a health issue. So consciousness is the same way. If our internal and external realities are not flowing in harmony with each other, then we're basically putting more weight on one aspect of our life, and then it makes it harder. And basically it deteriorates. It just it feels very painful. So that is very important, and I kind of went off. I don't know if that really made sense. I just saw that just a couple days ago when I was thinking about health and the flow of it all, because I was looking at ways to describe why our containers deteriorate, because that's what health is. So if we have a muscular issue and it just won't go away, it's deteriorating. It's not being contained in a way that is balanced, that it feels it's balanced. So if I want to exercise at a particular rate, let's say it's hiking for the day. If I, Jack, say I want to hike 8 hours right now, but my body or particular parts of my body say I don't want to do that, then we're going to have a fight to deal with. Let's say the next day, 2 days after that, because essentially my legs are going to say, or whatever part of my legs in particular, they're going to say, I don't like what you did, and we didn't have a whole lot of say in terms of doing this 8-hour hike. You weren't paying attention to us. You just did what you wanted. And so now we're basically going to pout for the next couple of days, and you're going to have to deal with it because you didn't ask us beforehand. We didn't have a harmonistic communication. And so we have to deal with that. And so a lot of times when that pain gets too hard to handle, just like any sort of fight with any other human being, you get to a certain point where you don't know what to do, because both of our attachments to whatever it is that we're fighting about it's misunderstood. It's too far from my consciousness. My consciousness can only peer into a certain level of life, and same with theirs. And when the two don't intersect, that's basically when the fight continues until our containers collapse. But most of our fights, we can come to some sort of agreement as to why one felt the way that they did and the other felt the way that they did. And that's because we let go of our own particular bubble and we said, I want to know what your perspective feels like, just so that we don't have to fight about these things anymore. And then once you get to that state, you notice that the fight isn't necessarily handled the same way. It's not so violent. We know how to communicate better with each other. The experience is much better. And that sort of communication is very important. But when our bubbles are too far apart from each other, it's harder to communicate. And that's when things can get really messy. So, so I'm talking a lot. Yes, so it's always good to have that open communication. You coming on? Do you have a question, Julie?
No, I'm good. I was going to let you know that whenever you want to take questions, just let me know, and then
Okay.
I'll start it. You can talk as long as you want to, and then just let me know.
Okay. And if anyone has a question before, you could just write a comment and just say, hey, I have a question, and I'll stop. So yeah, I only have, I mean, it could just be a little bit more, but I'm only about halfway through what I've written. And I can ramble. I'm good at rambling. So yeah, if no one has a question, I'll just keep going in terms of our relationships and the realities that we get in. So, there are a lot of combinations and permutations to our realities, because I was just talking about all the different relationships that we all have, and we might not necessarily be completely aware of them, but those relationships, those relationships can range from the foods, the drinks, the physical exercises, the spiritual exercises, the forms of information that we can obtain, and how those forms of information are delivered, technological influences and organic influences. So when we look at all those different relationships, it's actually an infinite amount of relationships, because this universe is holographic and it can be scaled fractally up and down to any size you want. So when things are infinite, it basically leaves it very open-ended. It's the fastest way to diffuse any sort of argument. Just say everything's infinite. But that's not reality that we live in. We live in a limited reality, which means things are bounded. And when things are bounded, that means that they have a particular container that I was talking about in terms of our glasses. That means they have a particular frequency, a particular vibration, and ultimately state of consciousness. So just to take something real easy, something real simple that we all know, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, if you just look at those things, you consume it, you put that inside your body, you become a part of that. Notice how it changes your own state of consciousness. And it's very important to see, and we all can see that, how those things can influence us. And if we put a certain amount of it in us, it can intensify that. So a lot of things, yeah, coffee. Coffee time. So we can look at those effects in our own state of consciousness and understand if it's in an alignment with us in particular, in our state of consciousness. And if it is, then like I was saying with the water cascading around the entire glass where it's covering all of the surface area of the glass, then you're in complete alignment with that, and that's perfectly healthy for you. That is the thing that you should be consuming. But not everything is so perfect. Not everything is so so harmonistic and in alignment with us. And sometimes we consume things, or we become a part of things. I don't like to say consume, but we become a part of, and we're in relation with those things. And we don't necessarily align with its state of consciousness and what we want to turn into. Because if I take a drink of something sugary, caffeinated, or alcoholic, I have to know, if I want to be healthy about it, I have to understand what my container, my personal conscious container looks like and feels like, and know the conscious container of whatever it is that I'm going to be in relation with. So if I can understand the two, I'll know how many sips or drinks to have in order to be at a level that I feel like is healthy for me and my reality and what I'm trying to accomplish. But if I don't, then I have too much, and then we all know where that goes, and it gets hard to recover, and a lot of issues happen out of that. Maybe we have liver failure because our liver said, hey, you're putting on such a workload, you're giving us such a workload that we have no idea what to do with this stuff, and we're about to shut down shop because we have, that's you now. You're gonna have to deal with that. It seems like you don't really care about us that much, to where you didn't ask us beforehand. You didn't really feel if this was something that we could take on at this time of day because of all the other stuff that you loaded on us. And so we have to understand the things that we are becoming a part of in order to align with that. And I don't want to say that there are things that are just naturally healthier. And it's because of this philosophy, this particular thing that I'm explaining in terms of aligning with our conscious container, and having the flow be evenly distributed. Because harmony is different for every single person and every single thing in the universe. So you can actually be unhealthy by trying to be healthy. And it sounds backwards. But if I'm trying to help someone, in their diet, most of the time people would say, cut out the desserts and eat raw food. Just eat raw food. Don't even cook it. Go back to the days way back when we actually had to, chop our own and kill our own food, and we didn't have fire to cook it. And how did we survive then? So basically we were the strongest then, but I don't really say that to people. I'll tell them they have that option. But what I tell people is feel into what serves the most purpose in your life. And if it is dessert at that time of day, for that hour, then you eat that dessert. And I tell them that, and they look at me so like I'm crazy. But I tell them that's what I do. I don't eat fully organic. I don't eat only healthy vegetables and fruits and no meat, and stay away from grains and gluten and all that. I don't do that stuff. But I also don't overdo it. That's the thing, is I talk with my body all the time. And so when I talk with my body all the time, they're telling me sometimes, I can do what I want. And then there are other times where they're like, hey, look, man, we had a rough week, and you can't really feed us that shit anymore. At least for a few days, we need to recover. And so I respect that. I pay attention to my body, and I respect that. And I say, all right, looks like we're going to eat healthy tonight, because I don't want to screw up what we have by just throwing something in there that makes me feel comfortable, that makes Jack feel comfortable, and not necessarily my body. Because yes, I am a part of my body, but I'm also at a different state than my body. It's like an individual human and the collective of humanity. Each individual has its own personality and its own voice and its own desires and life purpose. But when you throw them all together, it makes the collective called humanity. And that's essentially what a body is. You have individual personalities that make a collective of you, and you can look at it in both states, either in the communal state or the individual state. And if I only look at the communal state, which is what I call Jack, then I'm only putting what I want in my body, and it might not serve the most amount of purpose in what we all wish to accomplish. And if I only go in the side of my body, the individuals that make it work, then I, Jack, may not feel as fulfilled in what I eat. So basically we have to talk about these things, and we have to understand how does this feel in my body, and is this something I want to be a part of? That's the relationship of it. So very important in order to feel healthy, feel a purpose, even when you're eating pizza. You can still feel healthy. I know this sounds weird, but even after a workout, I'll feel like a beer is the best thing for me, rather than like a protein shake or just chugging water, because sometimes I need more carbohydrates in me, and I know that beer is concentrated carbohydrates, more concentrated than other forms of food. And so if I want immediate burst of short, fast acting energy, I'll go for that, and I don't actually get drunk. And that's the amazing thing. There were a couple of times I did this where I was like, I really feel like practically, in terms of practical use, I need something alcoholic, and only just a little bit. I'm not saying I'll go out to the bars and get drunk. I'm saying I'll get a beer, or maybe even 2 beers, and I'll drink both of them, and I'll feel what my normal state would be. And then when I get in that mode, that means I was in alignment with what I personally wanted and what my body wanted. And it could be what we perceive as being an unhealthy thing. So that's why I don't want to say that there is an absolute healthy choice, because if you want to go that far into it, just move off grid and chew on twigs. And I guarantee there will be a point where you're not going to feel fulfilled entirely. It may only feel that way. So it may only feel that way for a little bit. That's why some people need to take those vacations, because on either side of the spectrum, some people need to take vacations to enjoy things because they've worked their ass off. Or you go the other way. Some people need to take vacations where things are harder. That's why they go camping, because they don't have such luxury in what they get to eat. They don't have the choice. You have to make do with what you have and when you can get it, which usually takes longer if you're camping, because you're out in the wilderness and you can't just pop in your car and get whatever you want at the grocery store, because the grocery store has food from all over the world, and that naturally would not be a part of your community in that town that you live in. So we can go either way with it. And some people need to strip that luxury away and go camping. And some people need to heighten that luxury, depending on what you've done and how long you've been doing it for. And so that's where we have the exercise and then the recovery, which is energy. You push yourself and then you let it go, and you push yourself and then you let it go. So we have to understand that, you know, what we want to exercise in our realities also takes a recovery. And so there are particular downfalls in the spiritual community. And I'm not trying to poke it at anyone, but I'm going to poke. And the thing about it is that there are philosophies in the spiritual community that we don't understand can actually hurt us. And one of them is expansion of consciousness. We all want to, even I talked about expanding consciousness to have a healthier, more present and aware lifestyle. Yes, that is a good thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is the answer. Because if you really want to take that as far as it can go, you're not even going to be here at that point. Imagine only expanding. Expand every day. Expand, expand, expand. You're basically going to, I mean, you might turn into Trump, you know, just trying to take over every building and every business. And so we look at Trump and we say, I don't really like that guy. I don't like the way that he goes about things. And that's not sustainable, because he's eventually going to turn into a god, a demigod. And he's going to get whatever he wants. You know, he's always going to win. He's going to win so much, he's going to get sick of it. And that's what expansion's like. When we expand and expand and expand, we see more and more and more. And if we expand faster than what our physical container can take, that's when things start breaking down. And this is what happened to me. And I'm actually contracting my consciousness in various ways. I'm not trying to expand every single day. I'm not trying to learn something new every single day. But you hear a lot of motivational speakers talk about always learning something new. You know, a lot of professionals will talk about, you know, every day I made a choice to try and learn a new skill or new information or something like that. And that's really nice if that's in alignment with you. But if you're not in alignment with learning something new every single day, then don't try and do that like someone else has done, and like how they tell you that that is the answer, that to live a healthy life. It's their answer. It's not necessarily your answer. And your answer is still learning something, but you just have to know the frequency in which to learn and at what depth, because it's three-dimensional. So you can't just say, I'm going to learn something. You learn something at in a particular time frame and at a particular depth. And that's important to know, because then you'll learn it really well. You know, it's just like trying to cram for a test. You're not in alignment with the time frame and the depth of the information that needs to be done. So that's why cramming doesn't necessarily work. It works for some people because that's in alignment with them. They relaxed for, you know, the whole semester until the last week, and then they cram in a really short period of time. And so that's their particular container. That's what it looked like. And so they did everything in alignment and they aced the final exam. So there are a lot of different ways you can try and take this test. And, you know, I'm just making an analogy, but the test of life and all the things that we are a part of. So it's very important to understand what we're aligning with. And conscious expansion is good, but everything is curved. So even if you do want to go the only expanding route, it's actually going to loop right back around. And then you're going to have to contract back into singularity and then back out, and you'll expand and then you'll contract back in. So everything is spherical, everything is curved, and whatever you think is the answer, it's actually going to loop right back around, and you'll end up seeing the ass side of your answer, and it's going to suck and it's going to hurt. So if you understand both sides of this loop, that it is about expanding consciousness and contracting consciousness, then you'll understand how to go about that much better. Just like how personal trainers in their physical bodies, they'll talk about, your exercise, which is the expansion. You're pushing your limits. You're seeing how far you can go in terms of moving your body and in various ways. But they're not going to say, but I want you to run 24/7, or else you're not going to be totally healthy. They're going to say, you need to take a break. You did a lot today for what is a lot for you, because we all have a different threshold of what is a lot. And for what you've been accustomed to and what you can withstand, you need to recover. So you need to lay on the couch, turn into a vegetable, and just try and recoup. And so that's perfectly fine. So that's the contraction side. So I started doing that with my consciousness. I started contracting it in various ways because I was expanding it too far and too fast for what was sustainable in my own reality. And I started realizing that I needed to pull back in terms of that spiritual work that I've been doing, and do it in various ways. And that's up to me, because we all have different details in terms of how to contract and recover in various ways. But that is something I've been seeing in the spiritual community, is that we put a lot of emphasis on spiritual awakening without acknowledging that we live in a finite existence, a finite body, finite containers, consciousness. Consciousness is limited. That's what a bubble is. And the bubble can be infinite, come from an infinite place, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to feel things infinitely. It's very nice, and I feel like it's very romantic, and I like to talk about infinity all the time, but I have to accept that I can't infinitely run if I wanted to, because I don't really want to. I'll basically run and I'll say, I think I've moved my body enough, and then I'll stop when I want to stop. So that is something to understand. And a lot of people in the spiritual community are more intuitive. And so this is what I feel like hurts us the most in terms of the spiritual community. So it's not so much physical. We're not doing a whole lot of physical exercises, because when you're intuitive and you're feeling energies, you're a receiver at that point. You're not necessarily moving your own body, creating pressure differentials. In that sense, you're basically moving in the opposite direction. So when we meditate, we could meditate in a lot of different ways, but what we generally do is feel the energies around us by not moving our bodies as much as possible, relaxing every single bit, so that when the receiver is as relaxed as possible, it can pick up finer and finer subtleties of energy, which is usually why people are more intuitive. They're not as active and go like the mass population, because of all the way it's constructed, the way the matrix is constructed. And so people are in this movement to become more spiritual and meditate and feel these subtle energies, which is great, because we do need to get in touch with the invisible side of life. But at the same time, when we put ourselves in that position and we're basically trying to withstand all the energies that are moving around us, we now become submissive in that relationship. So an athlete tries to control the physical reality by moving its body and pushing and pulling. And so it's the one that's trying to dominate their physical surroundings. When you go the other way and you meditate and you try to do the least amount of physical movement, now you turn into the submissive side. And so we're feeling more, and it's more invisible. And so that gets hard, because like I said at the very beginning, the spiritual and the physical are one and the same thing. There's no real separation. There's that infinite thing coming out again. There's no real separation between the two, unless we're unaware of that separation. And that's where consciousness comes in. Consciousness is that boundary, and we can only be aware of so many things. And so when we start seeing more of our realities, our physical realities, as being a a connection to our spiritual realities and vice versa, then it gets a lot easier to understand how to work with our spiritual bodies and our physical bodies at the same time. So when I feel a physical thing, I don't necessarily say, doctor, cut this out of me, because I'm all about the physical side. And if something physically hurts, then it needs a physical remedy. That's like two negatives. It does create a positive, but it just it's like trying to put two magnets together, the same charge. They'll just push apart, and you can try and smash them together all you want, but basically, if you want to be in harmony, a total oneness, then you have to be both charges in that one single magnet. And so that's why you need to understand the connection between the two, the spiritual and the physical, and that they are one and the same. And then that communication basically opens up to figure out what we need to do in general, what kind of foods we need to eat, like I was talking about, how much of it to eat, because we all have different amounts and volumes to eat that would be good for us. So, you know, there are a lot of girls that like to eat because it looks good. And there are a lot of dudes that like to eat because of how much is on the plate. And it's like, I don't care what it is. I just need something in my stomach. And so girls, they could eat smaller amounts as long as it looks nice and clean and presentable. But it's not nearly enough. And that's my ex-girlfriend and I, we would go through these little battles where she would want to make, you know, finer, good looking meals that just didn't have a whole lot. And I was like, I don't think you realize what I physically do with my day. And I want something that I can eat a lot of. And she just didn't need that, but I did. And so it was you know, we had to hash that that particular aspect out and understand why we saw it the way we did. But it was just it came down to just what we wanted out of our culinary experience. So that's very important to understand all the different dynamics that play into all the different parts of our realities. And that's a heavy workload. So I'm not saying sit down and try and piece it all together in one day. You'll poof out of existence, I feel like. But it's nice to see and entertain more of these relationships because the communication gets much easier, and we can understand how to go about our health and what things we need. You know, if we need a massage, let's say I have a cold. Some people will say you should sleep more. And sometimes I say, yeah, that is the right answer, because the very thing that caused my cold, since I was being present in my reality, the very thing that caused my cold was not sleeping enough. That contributed to my low energy levels, which allowed this virus thing that I inhaled to essentially take over more of my body. But then there are other times where I've gotten sick, and it was actually because I was sleeping too much. And I was sleeping beyond my threshold, what I felt like was my threshold, and I actually felt weaker. And eventually, you know, a few days later, got a cold or whatever you want to call it. And so, you know, there are plenty of things in life that we look at as one side of it only being the only answer, but it's really, you're always going to have two sides to every coin. You're never going to have a one-sided coin. It doesn't matter if it's the same image on either side of the coin, you'll have two sides to it. So, you know, if we get a cold, like I said, the answer isn't always sleeping more. Sometimes for me, I feel like the best way to get over a cold at that particular cold is by doing a physical exercise. And usually it's because I wasn't doing enough of it before, what I felt like was enough. So you can go either way with it, and understanding more of our realities really helps in understanding that dynamic and how to approach it. Because sometimes what we feel like is the answer is the very thing that caused it, and that's where the loop comes in. And And that gets really tough. It's just like stress eating. You know, the very thing that makes us want to eat more is the stress in our lives. If it's, you know, workplace stress, relationship stress, financial stress. And so we feel like eating to make up for that because it makes us feel good. We have things running through our veins and it's all tingly, and we feel like we have some sort of resource that we didn't have financially, and so now we have it, you know, with food. And but then we start gaining weight, and then when we gain weight, we feel bad because we're like, oh, I was thinner, and that means if I'm thinner, I'm healthier. And so then they don't eat as much, but then they feel bad because of their workplace stress or whatever stress it is. And so then they eat more. And so then they feel bad because they're overweight or they're gaining weight. And you can see the loop that makes the experience the way it is. And the only way to really break it is by actually reversing that loop or just taking one of the two components out. Because you can't have a spinning ring with just one point. There needs to be 2 points spinning around each other. And when you pluck one of them, it fizzles out, and you broke the cycle. And so when you break cycles, you're essentially, you know, progressing into the next phase of your journey, just like the Mayan calendar. 2012 apocalypse, it's a measurement of states of consciousness. And states of consciousness, they're basically toroidal, which means that they have a vortex of energy. And the only way to have vortex is, like I said, 2 points. So is the only way to ascend beyond that vortex of energy that we experience. And in the example that I was using with eating, stress eating, and workplace stress, the only way is to remove one of those, either the workplace stress or the stress from gaining weight. And once you remove one, you now can move out of that cycle, and you now have more power to move into the next phase of your journey. And that's what we can call spiritual block, is just that cycle. And the way to move out of those blocks is by understanding the duality that is causing that cycle and why it's spinning around, because history repeats itself only because we're not being aware of what's causing that cycle. So like I said, it's conscious expansion really helps in that process of understanding the cycle, not allowing history to repeat itself, because then we don't have to feel the same things that we felt before. Same with physical pain. If I understand, you know, what causes my pain when I do a particular thing, the first time, it's very difficult to understand how to deal with that pain, and we freak out. And that's usually why we go to the doctors, because we're like, the doctor will know. But when we try to do it ourselves, it means, and we've never felt this before, and we don't know why this is happening. It's very mysterious, and it's a scary thing to say, I feel an overwhelming pain in my body, and I have no idea why it's happening. So what the fuck do I do? That is such a scary thing, because it can be life-threatening, and so we go about it in different ways. You know, if someone doesn't necessarily want to, or doesn't find that sort of pursuit interesting, then don't do it by yourself. You know, do whatever you feel like you have to do, which is obviously what we're going to do. But don't listen to this. Everything I just said and say, you know, I need to be able to fix everything on my own, because I also tried to do that and I ended up in the hospital. So I will say, do what you feel like is right for you. And I will say that the benefits of self-healing is that you get to work with it closer to the core, and you'll understand way more of the source of why it happened in the first place. So basically, after that moment, when you understand those things, you will not bump into this experience again. History will not repeat itself the same way. And so you'll have way more control in terms of what happens in your reality. But if that is not something that you want to do at that moment in your life and with that particular pain that you're feeling, it's best to have someone else try and work with it, that might have more experience in that. So, and neither is right or wrong, and both are right and wrong. So it really just depends on how you want to go about it, and what that means to you. So we can do it by ourselves, or we can do it with the help of someone else, and we can also help it in a lot of different ways, which is what this community wants to do. We don't want to use the same sort of medication that we've been using for so long. I think that's the main thing, because there are a lot of side effects that that basically don't really contribute to overall health. And so we're turning more into simple, organic remedies. But not everyone is ready for those, because some people really don't understand why they're feeling the pain that they feel. And if you're using oils or anything simple like that, then it might not be beneficial, because there are people in my friend base that ask me how to heal particular pains, and I gave them my more organic suggestions, but they were not on that. They were not at that point in their particular journey, and they wanted me to tell them how to like surgically remove it or something like that on a more physical level, more 3D level. And I was talking more in terms of feelings and self healing, but that just didn't align with them, because putting oil on their part of the body wasn't enough. It's just like someone waking up in the morning and then saying, here's your sugar cube for the day. And most people look at that sugar cube and they'll say, that is not nearly enough to do what I feel like I need in order to accomplish the goals that I have listed for the day. Thank you for that, sugar cube, but that is not going to do. And so they want something more intense. There are other times where you offer something more intense, and they deny that, because they're like, thank you, I already have the energy I need to accomplish all the goals that I have on my list. But I hope that serves you well. So, you can go either way. So don't always try and think that, or feel like organic remedies are good for everyone. Let's say cancer, for example, that's a big one. It's a lot of people in the spiritual community would say, hugs and kisses are going to heal this cancer, which I've heard from people. And I've read articles and seen studies that, people have healed cancer with hugs and kisses and just positive intention. But then there are other cases where people that have cancer don't feel like that is going to be the answer. Hugs and kisses aren't going to do it for them. And so they need something more intense. And that's why they go into radiation or just have it surgically removed, because that's in alignment with them. So we can't necessarily push our own personal remedies that work for us in the moment and say, this is what's going to be good for you, unless you're truly being genuine with them and want to truly help them, not for your own well-being, as to say like, yes, I helped this person, and make that the reward. When you really feel into someone, you'll understand what sort of remedy they need, and the intensity that they need it. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in terms of health and the connection between our physical and spiritual body. I hope it didn't go too far off for people, and my voice isn't too boring.
No, you did great. That was great. A lot of good information.
Thank you.
You could probably take like each each of those topics, and you could just expand on it and have like a whole session just on like each little point. You know, you could really go far out with it.
Yeah, I tried to not make it too long, but yeah, there's so many different ways. It's really just filling in the details. I think that's probably the most important thing about health, is just understanding all of our own particular details that we can apply to it. So I really just wanted to cover the outline of what health is, and why we don't always experience, you know, what we personally feel like is health, or even understand what is health. Some people don't even know what it feels like to be happy, you know, and it's all relative, you know. So it's really about just understanding trying to get in touch with our own personal details that make our realities the way it is. And I feel like that what I delivered was a generalization of how I've seen health work. And, you know, in my own personal experience listening to everyone else, I basically stripped away all those details from everyone's story and just said, all right, so this is generally why it happened. And then you can fill in your own details and go from there and really make your own prescription, which is just a formula. So once you see the variables in your reality, you can write your own equation, understand what the result was, and now you have your own prescription.
Yeah, I know, because we had talked about this before, but whenever went to see a lot of different doctors, and then I was just sort of going to the doctors and just expecting them to fix everything, you know, and then when after we talked and after I kind of relaxed about it and tried to just feel things out, I went for like a follow-up appointment, and they wanted to do an ultrasound of my thyroid, and I said, okay. Well, they called me and they said, well, we need to do this hearing test. And I was like, well, I don't remember asking about that. But intuitively, I felt like I should do it. Like, okay, I should just go do it. So then I went and did the hearing test, you know, and it turns out I have like hearing loss in my left ear that I didn't realize I had. And so I think that's really helped me to just like relax and just feel it. And just if I feel like I should go with it, then go with it. If not, then I don't. I
Yeah.
just listen to myself. So
Yeah, I feel like that's a very hard thing to be aware of, knowing when to do it yourself or have a doctor do it. And yeah, it just gets hard because you can go either direction, and some people want to make everything the doctor. I know people that just make doctor's appointments just to make them, just so that, you know, it's like regular maintenance on your car, even though there's nothing wrong with it. And so I'm like, you're basically just wasting your money. And same with going to the doctor, when I feel like it's something that you can do on a spiritual level. You can heal yourself on a spiritual level, which is actually something I didn't really talk about as much. And we can basically mold our physical realities the way that we feel like will serve the most amount of purpose. And so the physical form will actually mold in that from a metaphysical state, you know, in terms of my feelings. And so when I try and tell people that, when they tell me that they have a particular pain or something like that, let's say headaches, for example, I use that example, but I would tell them, you can change the state of your headache whenever you want. And the only reason I say that is because I can do that, and I know how to do it. And it doesn't necessarily work for them. And so they basically need someone else to do it for them, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, we all have our own process of going about it. And yeah, I know people that just want to be at the doctor's just because that's what makes them feel healthy, and they need to invest in that, and that's perfectly fine. But then I feel less healthy when I go to a doctor, because my perception of doctors is it's just going to suck money out of my pocket, because I know how to do the things that they're telling me to do, except for the surgery. But, you know, what caused it and what I'm going to have to do to heal it, I'm like, I could do that on my own. and I know how to work with my body at that level. And so really, I'm just paying you to tell me what I already know. And so you don't necessarily have, I don't see as much value in it. But if I don't understand what's going on in my body, then I do feel like I need to invest in it. So our perception of things really determines where we should go. Like I said, my perception of doctors is just taking money out of me and not necessarily fixing the whole thing. So that's why I want to do a lot of self-healing, self-remedy, rather than always going to the doctor as soon as I feel something wrong. Because there are people I work with, they'll feel the slightest thing off, and see ya. Yeah, they'll feel the slightest thing that's off in their body, and they'll just say, I'm gonna pop over to the doctor's, and then go from there. And I'm like, really? That's all it takes? But for them, it's just like going to the grocery store or something. So
So do you want to take some questions now? Are you up for it?
sure, yeah.
Okay. Neil, you were here first. Do you want to ask a question first, or?
No, it's okay. You can pass the mic on. I'm happy to listen to
Okay.
everybody else. Very, very interesting, like extremely interesting. So yeah, thanks for
Thank
doing
you.
that.
Chris, do you want to go?
I don't have a question, but thank you. This was very informative and reiterated a lot of things. So thank you very much.
Okay, so
You're welcome. Thanks.
Let's do it this way. So does anybody have anything that they want to talk about or share or ask a question about? Does anybody else want to speak?
Okay, so Claire's asking if she says she wants to know some more information about Jack and like exactly like what sort of services he offers and things like that. You know what I mean? Yeah, and his background and things like that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, not mentioning all that. So I'm just an average Joe, and I'm kind of mixed between worlds. So like my special ability is merging worlds together, because each world is built upon certain philosophies, principles, and perceptions. And so what I like to do is touch in little bits in all of those worlds, as many as I can get my hands on, and just see how they can fit together rather than be so separated. So I can't really say I'm like a jack of all trades. That's probably the best way to describe it. And I'm trying to explain the world that we experience in a particular, and I am Jack, yes. That's why it's so fitting. And so I want to try and explain how they all fit together and at a particular depth, because people will look at the world and basically say, yeah, I have an understanding of how things work. You're born, you have a birth certificate, you have a number, someone gives you a name, and then you go through an educational system, and then you get a job, meet a partner, get married, buy a house, have 2.5 kids, save up for retirement, and then not enjoy that retirement. And so we can say like that's the cookie cutter reality, and people will have an understanding of that and how that works and all the things that are in place to make that what we call society. But there are a lot of different ways to experience life outside of those boundaries and constructs. And so I'm very curious in how other cultures work, and just how many different ways people can talk about life. And so I really listen to people and just try and understand where they're coming from in terms of how they view their own reality. And that's how I help them, is that I listen to them and I try and feel into the kind of perceptions that it takes, and to basically experience what they're experiencing. And then from there, I'll be able to shift those perspectives, because usually if I'm trying to help someone, they want to get to another place than where they are. And so that's where I come in, is that I try to get to that point with them to where there's more ability to shift perspectives. And so it's difficult because everyone wants to shift at different levels and intensities. So I invite all sorts of issues and perceptions and physical constructs and all that, and try and work with that however it is that I can, because I can't say that I can handle every issue, but that's what I like to do with people, is really just help them see something that they haven't seen before. I don't know if that yeah, in a way. So I don't know if that helps, but it's kind of hard to explain. So shifting perspectives is the easiest way to sum it up.
So do you want to mention like your website?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so my website is www.jackcoleman.life. So that's JACKCOLEMAN.life. And you can book sessions. I like to do sessions with people, one-on-one sessions. Yep. And so, yeah, if you wanted to try and see something they haven't seen before, I like to provide tools for people. So I basically just try and work with what's going on in their life, and it kind of sounds like a counselor, but there are a lot of different tools that I can provide that is not necessarily accepted or understood in that arena, that academic arena. But yeah, so basically you can sign up for one-on-one sessions, and we can, once you get online and go to the site, it'll just, you fill out a contact form, and then we can talk about timing and all that. And the link is good.
Okay, so I'm going to then stop the broadcast in just a few minutes, unless anyone else has something else they want to talk about or ask or say.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Jack.
Hello.
Thank you for giving this interesting information to us.
Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it.
So my question is, how do you go into a certain pain? I have a lot of knee pain, and I would like to understand it and go into it and see what comes up.
Yeah, that it's interesting how you can go into pain in terms of remedying it. Let's say I have knee pain. If I want to talk with it that day and just, fix it for that time, just get into a meditative state where you're not really moving anything, and you're putting all of your attention, all of your focus right on your knee, and go right to the core of that pain. So when you do that, don't approach the pain like it's a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? Like you're dreading it. If you go in there saying, I understand you feel like I've done something to you, because otherwise, what would that pain be? So pain basically just means that we didn't do something the way that the knee wanted to be treated. And so if you approach putting your attention to that, to your knee, then basically it will open up a channel. Because, I mean, if you really want to look at that communication, just look at how two people, a couple, a married couple, how they converse with each other about particular issues. They don't go right off the bat saying, I'm not going to listen to anything you say because it's just going to suck. It's just going to hurt. That's the worst way to approach a debate, a conversation, you know, any sort of argument. So what you want to do in that conversation is say, I don't want to feel this way. And now I'm talking in terms of changing your energetic state with your feelings. So you have to have that feeling of, I'm sorry that you feel this way. I don't want to continue this. So I genuinely want to know what I did in order to push you beyond your limits, because I didn't know that was your limit. And so when you get to that state and you're putting yourself into that pain, you can now have that conversation. You can get intuitive images of you know what happened. Let's say you walked too much. Let's say you're stretching. You're not stretching the best way. Like the way that you're stretching is you're locking your knee. If you're trying to stretch your hamstring, you're not locking your knee, and you're not being aware that when you lock your knee, it puts a ton of pressure on the joint more than anything, more than the muscle. And so, you know, those things will come in, and you may not be necessarily aware that that's what comes in. But when you put yourself in that open channel, the answers kind of flow in, even if they seem really odd, and just something like you've never really entertained before. So when they do come up, basically just go with that. So if it's a matter of stretching the hamstring with a locked knee, and for some reason that image of a locked knee stretching the hamstring came up, start working with that whenever you feel the pain. And so now you can basically stretch a different way that alleviates the pain, because you originally put too much pressure on your knee. But you can also try and heal it with your consciousness. So those are two different approaches. You can physically change the way that you're stretching to help alleviate the pressure on your knee. But then when you are putting your consciousness into your knee and the pain that you feel, you can now have that conversation of, I don't want to do this to you anymore. I really feel sorry. I'm truly sad about what I did, and I really appreciate you, because without the knee, I won't be able to walk the same way. And I really want to continue walking, and I want you to be a part of my journey. And so those feelings are what you can send to your knee. And whenever I do that, the pain does not throb the same way. Most of the time it goes away, depending on the kind of issue that I'm going through at the moment. But yeah, so not only do you have to talk with it energetically through your feelings like you would any other human being having an argument and really trying to reconcile the issue, you also have to understand how to move it from that point on, because it's probably not going to move the same way depending on the kind of injury or ailment that you're working with. I don't know if that helps you.
Yes, excellent. That's really helpful. Thank you, Jack. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, so I just want to thank you, Jack, for all your information. It was really good. I know it's really helpful for this community, and thank you everyone for coming. And so what I'll do is I'll put Jack, I'll put your information below the YouTube link and everything, so everybody will see
Awesome.
that too. Yeah.
Thank you, Julia. I really do appreciate being invited to this and being able to do this for everyone. It means a lot to me. So, and thank you everyone for joining. I really do appreciate everyone that came. So, yes, much love.
Thank you. Much love, everyone.